welcome to Backyard Farmer. I'm Kim Todd, and I'll be your host for the next hour of answering those gardening questions. We'd love to hear from you. Those volunteers are standing by to take your calls, so just dial 1-800-676-5446. We only have one more show this season where we'll take your pictures and emails. That address is byf@unl.edu, so please tell us where you live. Give us as much information as you can so we can give you the best answer. And do not forget to follow us on our Facebook fan page. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can watch past shows and some really great videos. So we start, as always, this way. Maybe next year we'll start that way. Kate, you have two pictures on the first one. This comes to us from Pilger, and he is asking, any idea what causes these apple defects?
Yeah, so this is what we call catfacing on the apples, and it's most commonly caused by insects like stink bugs and the brown marmorated stink bug, and they have these piercing, sucking, straw-like mouth parts that pierce into it, drink up the sap, and then as the fruit grows, it starts to deform. And I guess it's supposed to look like a cat's face. I don't see it, but that's what it's called. And unfortunately, dealing with stink bugs in orchard trees can be a little bit difficult because a lot of insecticides are going to be short-lived, and it's the young stink bugs that are most susceptible. So there are sprays that you can do, but it takes some monitoring starting in kind of March and April. So keep an eye out for the stink bugs early and just avoid spraying during that flowering time.
So if they do one of those typical everything fruit sprays, is that going to make a difference early on or not?
Not really. It's, like I said, it's kind of difficult to control, so you can try your best, but just keep in mind that it might not be very effective.
All right, thanks, Kate. You have one picture on the next one. This comes to us from Campbell. She says it's a picture of a bug that her mother finds on her floor and on the countertops at random. What is it, and can you treat them?
Sure, this is a larder beetle. It's what we call one of the pantry pests because they're commonly found in pantries because they infest dried goods. Larder beetles in particular like cured meats, and so a lot of clients that I have commonly find it in dog food, pet food, things that are high in protein like that. But they'll also infest things like taxidermy and dead animals. And so it's really just a matter of finding of what's infested, where are they coming from, and then discarding whatever that is. And in the meantime, you can simply vacuum up the beetles that you do find.
All right, excellent. I hope no dead animals in the kitchen. Other
hopefully
than the ones
not.
you're
Maybe
going to
outside
eat.
the kitchen, but hopefully not in it.
All right, two pictures on the next one. This comes to us from both Lincoln and a Malcolm viewer. All the walnuts look like this inside. What is this? How did it happen? How do they prevent it? They're mature trees.
Yes, so this is another kind of difficult one, unfortunately, but these are walnut husk maggots, which are the larvae of a type of fruit fly. And so they'll lay their eggs on the husk of the walnut, they'll eat inside there, but luckily they don't enter the nut. So the nut's going to be unaffected in this case. One good practice is just proper sanitation around the trees if possible. So the larvae will pupate in the soil, so if you're able to get those walnuts up before that pupation time, before the winter, that's a really great practice. Otherwise, there are insecticides that are labeled to control the adults, and that's going to be something very timely in around August. But if they're mature trees, once again, it's just understanding that it can be a difficult and ongoing process.
All right, thank you, Kate. Okay, Matt, two pictures on the first one. This is an Oakland viewer. They've been mowing this pasture for years. They've planted trees, shrubs for beauty, etc. This year it seems like they have more clover than turf or prairie. They want to treat this with a pre-emergent next spring. What will work, if anything, and they'd also like to control crabgrass.
Okay, so if it is indeed a pasture and you have it around all these trees, I would say if it's just white clover in there, it's kind of a beneficial plant to have in there. It's good for pollinators, and it will not outcompete the grass, but at certain times of year it will. And you can actually have grass and clover growing together, and the clover will create fertilizer or nitrogen in the soil and fertilize the grass. So if it's something that you don't want to put a lot of time and money into by like reseeding and spraying, I would stay with the white clover. If you want to prevent crabgrass, next spring, go ahead and put down pendimethalin, and that would be a safer one to go around all the trees. and that would prevent, a lot of those summer annual weeds. Perennial is the clover, so I would say leave that one in there in that big of an area, just because it's kind of beneficial.
All right, thanks, Matt. One picture on the next one. This one says it was totally wooded with trees. This is Lincoln. And then volunteer shrubs and things that were torn out. It was graded, irrigation was installed, and then it was actually a blown-on grass seed. Came in beautifully, but now there are all these weeds. How and when do they control them, and will this continue to happen since this area was neglected?
I'd say what you have there is a really good stand of grass, and if you continue to fertilize and water that area, it'll grow in. So now is the time to treat. It looks like the grass is old enough to use a 2,4-D product. If there is ground ivy in there, you can use one containing triclopyr, and that one will work a little bit better on those tougher to control weeds. And it's available in some mixes, or it's called, if you're getting it from a store, usually like tough to control weeds, and it'll have triclopyr in there. And that one works well on ground ivy. So now is the time to treat, and if you do have regrowth, let's say 4 weeks from now, you could treat again. It's still going to be all right to go later into the fall.
All right, and one more. This one comes to us from Utica. He wants to know, is there a herbicide that he can put on in the fall in the garden to help with weeds in the spring? And this is all over some bare patches.
Okay, so if you have weeds in those gardens right now and you want to kill them, I mean, an easy way to do that would be just to either till it or tear it up and rip them out. Another product that would work would be, let's say, like Diquat, which is a burn down product, and I think that is labeled for landscapes or for gardens, and that'll just kill anything that's in there. But if you're going to try and prevent new stuff from growing, prune would be probably the best selection for a garden. It's safe, and it would cover some of those winter annuals and maybe stay around in the spring too to cover some of those early spring summer annuals or winter annuals. So I would go with that if you're going to try and prevent the weeds from coming up.
All right, thanks, Matt. Dennis, 2 picks on the first one. This is Carney. Kate got snails last time, so it's your turn.
Yeah.
So it's a fish pond, thousands of these small snails. He thinks also some ram's horn. Good, bad, definitely ugly, and does he need to get rid of them, and how?
Well, they're propagating because you have high nitrates and high phosphates. A lot of fertilizer in there, which causes algal blooms, which is their food. So you can control them by controlling the amount of fertilizers getting into the pond. Otherwise, they're not really causing too much of a problem, and there is small little animals that will eat them in the pond. There's certain fish that'll eat them, and crayfish will eat them, and things like that.
All right, 2 pictures on the next one, Dennis. This comes to us from Des Moines, Iowa. She's got 2 owls in the backyard that she really enjoys. You can see one sitting on the bird bath there. They scare away all the other birds. Is there a legal method to get them to leave? Would a fake large plastic owl deter them, and then get rid of the fake ones? She wants the songbirds too.
Yeah, well, they'll stick around. These are barred owls, barred. They are protected. There is no really legal way to deter them. Personally, I like the owls better than the songbirds. And once enough songbirds get eaten, the owls will move on, and songbirds will come back, and then the owls will come back, and the songbirds will go away, and be a nice cycle.
Okay. In other words,
just keep feeding the songbirds, and then the owls will have food too, so everybody's happy.
Okay. One picture on the next one. This hawk was discovered on East Campus, actually, by some of my students. Mm-hmm. What is it? Corider's
hawk. It's actually a subspecies of the redtail, only found in the Great Plains, and they go from northern Great Plains to southern Great Plains. And so it's a morph or subspecies of the red-tailed hawk called the Corider's hawk.
It's beautiful. All right, Sarah, 2 pictures on the first one. This is a viewer in Omaha who says he's seen this on 3 ash trees in North Omaha, dieback above, the lush growth below. What's up?
So yeah, we're seeing a lot of trees in Lincoln looking like these days, and this is a combination of emerald ash borer damage and drought. So I think drought has lowered the vigor of the trees, which has allowed the survival of the emerald ash borer larvae, and they're starting to kill those upper branches. So unfortunately, emerald ash borer is just getting started in Lincoln, and we're going to see a lot more of this over the next 10 to 15 years to come.
All right.
Not
so
too much. You can't really do anything for that tree at this point.
cut her down. Okay. 2 pictures on the next one. This comes to us from Dwight. A new tree here, and she was told not to prune the first year. Should she do any pruning at all on this one just yet? It's pretty young.
Yeah, you need to start doing some shaping because it's growing in kind of an odd pattern here. So keep in mind with any tree, a strong central leader system is the strongest branching structure. So I would choose the middle shoot to be your central leader. And then on those long side shoots, I wouldn't remove them, but I would shorten them so that they become shorter than the central leader. And you're going to continue to do that over the next, several years to encourage that central leader to take off and for this tree to develop a good up branch structure. Don't limb it up anymore because it's already been limbed up, I would say a little too far at this point. So leave those lower limbs attached, just shorten them.
All right. And one picture on the next one, Sarah. She's wondering what caused this splitting or cracking in the trunk of this crabapple.
So there could be a couple different causes for this. It could be what we call a sunscald damage, which is common in young trees when the bark is thin and the sun shines on the bark in the winter, and then we end up with some bark damage. It could also be related to root issues, though, sometimes with trees that are planted too deeply or trees that have girdling roots. As those roots compress the trunk, it can result in death of the bark above those roots. So, the tree, you can see in the picture, the tree is putting on new tissue to try to cover and seal over that dead area of bark. That's the best thing that can happen for that tree. So what you want to do to support this tree at this point is to put a mulch ring around the base. I would come out at least 3 feet from the trunk in a nice circle, 3 inches, in a nice flat pancake layer of mulch, and make sure that it stays well watered, deep and infrequent during dry periods, and enable that tree to recover as well as it can.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. Well, with fall right around the corner, it's time to get those container houseplants back indoors. There are a few simple things to keep in mind. Scott Evans is going to tell us how to prepare your plants for the move back home.
It's hard to believe that we are wrapping up summer and getting ready for fall. And with that, we need to start thinking about getting our houseplants that have been outside all summer ready to come in for the winter. I want to share some tips that will hopefully make this a little bit less stressful for both you and your plants. The first thing that we need to do is stop fertilizing our houseplants with full strength. During the growing season, this is a great way to keep our plants happy and healthy, but as we move into fall and winter, houseplants are not going to be growing as aggressively. When we fertilize, this could push some green growth that can cause some issues down the road, so make sure that you hold off on fertilizing our plants. The next thing that we want to do is to enjoy the outdoors and get our plants hosed off. This is going to be a great way to dislodge any type of hitchhiking insects such as spiders, aphids, mealybugs. We want to focus on the back side of the leaves. This is where the spider mites and whiteflies like to hang out, so make sure that you focus your water on the back side. We don't need to add soap. Just use water, and we want to do this a couple times, maybe 2 or 3 times, to make sure that our plants are free of any insects. While you're washing off your plants, try to pay attention to the saucer or the drip tray that might be attached to the container. Sometimes we get millipedes, roly-polies, and even centipedes that like to hang out in those spaces, so before you bring them in, just give those saucers a good once over. We also want to try to start transitioning our plants to lower light environments. One way we can do this is to take the plants out of full sun and place them underneath a deck or in the shade of a tree for a couple hours, and then move them back out into their original space. This isn't always the easiest thing to do because a lot of us work during the day, but we could try our best, and that's going to help reduce some of that stress from coming inside. The next thing that we want to do is to make sure that we are prepared. Most of us are going to wait for that first frost warning before we start bringing plants in, but in the meantime, we can make sure that we have any type of clear plastic trays, plant caddies, and the spaces carved out indoors for our house plants. A lot of us probably have a new plant or two since the growing season has started, so make sure that you have space to put your new plants into. And you can check out our YouTube page where you can find some other segments that we talk about houseplants and grow lights, and that can help ease some of those issues that you might be dealing with throughout the winter. Hopefully you can find some of these tips helpful to make that transition from outside to inside a little bit easier.
Thanks, Scott. And if you follow those simple rules, your plants will continue to thrive indoors during those colder months. All right, Kate, one picture on this first one. This comes to us from Valley. He says, are these harmful? After all, there are a lot of cottonwoods in Nebraska.
Yes, so this is a cottonwood borer beetle, and they can cause some damage. The adults will feed on newer growth or stems of the trees, and they'll actually lay their eggs at the base of the tree under the soil line, and that's where the borers go into and may cause some damage to the roots or the base of the tree. Usually most of the damage that's concerning is for younger cottonwood trees. Older trees tend to bounce back okay, but really when it comes to borers, the most important thing to keep in mind is just keep the tree healthy. Make sure it's irrigated correctly, fertilize, have that mulch ring that Sarah had talked about, and they'll bounce back pretty well.
All right, thanks, Kate.
Yeah.
2 pictures on the next one. This is a Lincoln viewer that has 3 city trees, swamp white oaks. Every year they get more and more bullet galls, and then of course they have, what they're saying is thousands of angry wasps. Is there a way they can stop the cycle here?
I don't doubt the wasps. So what's happening here is these bullet galls have what we call extra floral nectaries. So they're producing nectar, which is attracting these wasps. Luckily, wasps like these yellow jackets and paper wasps that we see in the picture, if they're away from their nests and they're just foraging and feeding, they're usually not that aggressive as compared to when they're protecting something. Dealing with the bullet galls, I feel bad saying this for like every tree question, but it can be difficult because the little tiny synipid wasps that live in the galls are protected. And so you can do some pruning. There's some research into systemics or treating in April with the spray, but really those options are limited and not very effective. And then one last thing is that he mentioned that this is a city tree. Mm-hmm. So before you do anything to these trees, you need to contact your city or the Game and Parks Department just to make sure that whatever you do is permittable.
Great, thanks. And 2 more on the next one. This is an Omaha viewer. She's wondering what is causing the damage to a red oak tree on the leaves, and can it be treated?
Yeah, so this is caused by the oak skeletonizer moth. And so the caterpillars are what are feeding on these leaves and causing that skeletonization. And they'll actually form little cocoons and pupate on these leaves. So one thing you can do is to simply prune out these dead leaves and destroy them to prevent that next generation for next year. Another thing you can do is, spray the trees as well. There's a couple generations per year that you would want to target for these, and you can use a BT spray in this case, and you're going to want to do that by early June, and then the second generation is going to be around in August. So those are the 2 times you would want to target for this.
All right, excellent. Okay, Matt, one picture on this first one. She lives in North Platte. She says this weed, not the toe of her shoe there, is taking over the front yard. The roots are really tough to pull. What is this?
Yes, this is wild violet or blue violet, and it is a perennial weed that will spread by seed. So if you can control it now, it doesn't look like it's full, like thick, and generally using broadleaf herbicides with triclopirinate, like I mentioned with the Creeping Charlie, work best on it because it gets a little bit better down into that root system and kills the plant. So application now, the only thing I would mention is make sure that it's adequately watered, it's not drought stressed, because if you're spraying drought stressed weeds, odds are the herbicide isn't going to translocate to those roots.
All right, 2 pictures on the next one. This is an Omaha viewer and wants us to also give advice on this. Imagine that, same thing probably, and a second one, and wonder if he should do anything to prepare for next spring in his turf. So we've got this one. I think we have a second picture on this one.
Okay, so yeah, this one, same thing that I was talking about with the last one. Now is the best time to treat these because they're going to be going dormant for the winter. They're going to take that down into the root and kill them. So that would probably be an application that you're going to do now. And that looks like ground ivy as well in the second one. So treating those now, and if you do have thin areas that you need to overseed, now is still in the window of doing it. Get water on it and get it germinated. Looks like it's going to stay warm enough to get that plant through the winter.
All right, 2 pictures on the next one. This is a Lincoln viewer that said their beautiful irrigated, well-managed lawn now looks like this in a couple of spots. One spot was where they did have a tree removed, but until very recently it looked good. Within a couple days, something tore it up. They saw a skunk, Dennis, but what do they do now to reestablish and match the turf?
Okay, so yeah, it's most likely white grub damage this time of year. They're pruning on those roots, and they're big and they're close to the top, so the skunk is going to peel back the turf and just have a smorgasbord. So that is one thing that's going to keep happening. Treating now really doesn't do much because they're going to stay there. They're hard to kill. There's a couple products, contact products that would work, but I don't know if I'd recommend them in that situation. So going in there and overseeding is probably your best bet. Overseeding with something similar that you had in there, aerifying, trying to get it in there, and see where else the turf is loose. Maybe you can just pull up on it, and if it does pull up and you can tear it out, maybe just take that out and seed those areas too, or try and keep it well watered so it can re-root before the winter comes.
All right, and speaking of skunks, Dennis, your first picture is actually a movie.
Okay.
This comes to us from North Platte. She said she sees a surfite of skunks. Look at those guys. They sent the video, had to look up the word, learned it was rare. That's a lot of skunkage.
It looks like 2 litters because they don't look, it's hard to say. Yeah, it is rare, and surfite is a group of skunks, like a murder is a group of crows. Do you know what a group of porcupines is? Prickle.
A prickle.
Yeah. So don't land in a prickle of porcupines. That's really bad. And you don't want to land in a surfine of skunks either. You won't smell too good. But I would just enjoy it. I mean, it's rare. They're not causing any problems. Now, if you have any grubs, they'll probably be able to get rid of those grubs really quick.
It's really cool that they saw that, and thanks for sending that. All right.
I'm sure that it only happens in areas that have, acreages and pretty wide.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, you have one picture on the next one. This comes to us from Longmont, Colorado. She's wondering what would make such a hole in the side of her house. She hasn't heard pecking. She hasn't seen a critter. Right. And so what is the mystery species?
By the way the hole is done, it's not round and it doesn't look like squirrel, but with all that, what we call rub marks from the oils in the fur and the probably urine, that's pointing to Norway rats. Ooh. If it was in Nebraska, where we don't have any climbing rats, like roof rats, I would say Norway rat. But I'm not sure if Longmont has roof rats, maybe roof rats, but just the amount of rubbing and urine and the way that hole is dug, it's pointing to a rat.
Ooh, so call somebody.
Yeah, do something about it.
All right, 2 pics on the next one. These come to us actually from our own Jody. So a squirrel was stealing whole sunflower heads, and then a squirrel was stealing her nuts. And how do you stop the sunflower thief, and do they really bury those nuts?
Yeah, well, they'll eat some and get fat right now, and then they'll bury some to get later on. He's doing pretty good. He's got 2 in one bite. It's hard for him to do that. And, and taking the whole thing back or finding a place, that's a lot of nudgy there. Yeah, they're smart. I don't know. I think you can spare some acorns and spare some sunflower seeds.
Well, they took the whole head off the, look at that guy.
Give them one head and you chew on the other head and everybody's fine.
All right. Why are we not surprised at that answer?
Yeah, I don't think there's much you can do down to it, so might as well enjoy it.
All right.
Especially if it's Jody.
If he's outside of city limits in season, isn't it?
No, this is in the backyard farmer garden.
Yeah, it's not. No firearms.
All right, Sarah, you have one picture on this first one. This is Central City. She has a lilac leafed out and flowered in April, and then the leaves turned brown and fell off. And then in August it leafed out, and then it's flowering and flowering. What's going on? And should she do something about this?
Well, there's really nothing you can do about it. Sometimes early spring blooming plants will do this. They'll bloom late in the summer, completely out of season. It can be caused by a lot of different things. If the flower buds died in the spring, like say due to a late spring freeze, then sometimes the plants will set buds again and they'll bloom later in the summer. Sometimes stress, drought stress or environmental stresses can cause these types of things. Really all it's doing is you're not gonna have quite as many flowers in the spring because these buds have bloomed right now, but it shouldn't have a really severe impact on the plant overall. So, and again, there's really not anything you can do about it anyway. So I would just kind of enjoy it, and hopefully you'll still have a good amount of flowers in the spring to enjoy.
All right, thanks, Sarah. You have one picture here. This comes to us from Plattsmouth. She got a potted Mother's Day hydrangea, and she's wondering when she should put it in the ground.
So the floral hydrangeas are almost always the species big leaf hydrangea, which is a southern species. They have those beautiful big flower heads, which of course is why they're sold as a floral plant. But they are not reliably winter hardy in Nebraska. So the chances of this plant surviving if you plant it outside, I would say, are about 10%.
Okay.
So keep it in the house and grow it as a house plant.
All right,
Yeah.
excellent. We have one picture on this next one. This is Omaha. This is false dragonhead, which is Physostegia, and they're tall and they're leaning over. Is there a way he can just shorten those and keep them from leaning over like that?
So sometimes perennials do, this is called lodging, where they get a little too tall and then they tend to kind of flop over. The things that help with that, make sure that this plant is as much sun as you can provide it. Make sure that you're providing as little water as possible. Too much watering can make the stems grow too tall. Don't fertilize it. If those things aren't enough, the other strategy you can do is about the end of May or early part of June, cut the stems down about halfway. So you cut them down to, again, about maybe 6 to 8 inches, and then let them regrow. And that will make the base of the stem stronger, and hopefully they will stand up better.
All right, great. Thanks, Sarah. Well, we have a break coming up, but before that, let's hear from Gannon Rush from UNL's High Plains Regional Climate Center about what we can expect on this week's weather forecast.
Thanks, Kim. We have a pretty seasonable week ahead of us, with highs in the 80s for the majority of the state. Out west, where it's consistently been the hottest this year, temperatures will be in the 90s from Saturday through Monday. Sunday will be the hottest day of the week, and there could be a slight dip in temperatures on Wednesday. The good news is, chances of rain are up this week, but the amounts are still not quite there. Chances of scattered storms are possible late Friday into early Saturday across the central part of the state, but the greatest odds are likely next week. Currently, the highest amounts are expected up north near Valentine. Looking ahead, there is confidence of above normal rainfall and much needed precipitation late next week. And that's your weekly weather forecast. Back to you, Kim.
And of course, now it is time for the lightning round. Sarah, ready?
You bet.
Of course. So your first one comes to us from Sydney. He has a new hybrid elm, new-ish, 3 or 4 years. It's a beautiful tree, but it's got some 2-inch diameter limbs down low. Should he go ahead and take those off or head them back and do it all at once or over some time?
Don't do it all at once. You'll want to limb those branches up gradually over the course of several years. Branches low on the trunk actually are really important because they help develop girth, so don't cut them off too soon.
All right. Omaha, why would a clematis look like a shrub and not have any flowers this year?
I would say that the flower buds have died, but I can't say exactly why.
Okay. Sioux City, is it too late for a cover crop in a 4 by 25 foot raised bed?
Nope, you could still plant annual rye or oats. Yeah, there's still time.
Okay. Bellevue, they just planted a whole bunch of fall sale plants from a good supplier. Should they use fish emulsion now to get them started?
No, don't fertilize in the fall.
All right. This is a Lincoln viewer who wants to know whether they can cut back an intersectional Bartzella peony in the fall like they do a herbaceous peony.
No.
Okay. North Platte, if they need to transplant rhubarb in the fall, is that okay?
Yeah, rhubarb will survive. Just take as big of a root ball as you can and make sure it stays well watered through the rest of the fall.
Nice job. All right. The bar is set. Dennis, you ready?
Yep. The frog's butt, semi-permeable.
Okay, this is an Omaha viewer who saw a little skinny fox with big ears, kind of a reddish thing. What kind of a fox
Red
would
fox.
that be? A red fox?
Yeah, the younger one's skinny.
Okay, this is a Blair viewer who put a tablespoon of mole and gopher poison down a hole and is wondering, does that move in the soil? Because the hole was by his garden, so will it poison plants?
Not knowing what poison is, I can't say.
Okay. What animal would steal an entire tomato at night and leave no trace?
Probably a woodchuck or a raccoon.
Okay. We have bats flying. This is a Lincoln viewer, and they're saying they seem larger than normal. Is that a different kind of bat?
Probably not. It's probably a large brown bat, and it's just that they're seeing more adults than young.
Okay. This is a viewer. We don't know where this one is from. They're seeing holes an inch or less in diameter, about a foot apart, in all sorts of spots in the garden and in the mulch.
Probably a bird going after grubs or something.
All right. Are the campus flying squirrels still on campus?
As far as we know, yes.
All right. Also a nice job. Not nice enough, but a nice job.
I guess.
Okay, Matt, you ready?
All right, let's do it.
Okay, this is a Bennington viewer. They had an outbuilding removed. They now have 10,000 square feet of totally bare soil. They're wondering whether they can dormant seed buffalo grass in that space.
You could dormant seed it. If it's fairly level, just do that around November, December.
All right, and their follow-up question, also lightning, is do they need to cover it with something or drill it or what?
Just get it in the soil, and if you want to, you can cover it, and it'll help keep it there over winter.
All right. We have an Oakland viewer who wonders, is it still okay to overseed their lawn, and if so, what seed should they use?
Yes, it's still okay, and use the seed that matches yours or something that you want to go to. Tall fescue or bluegrass if it's the lawn you're trying to do. Usually tall fescue because bluegrass fills in.
Okay, and then two people have asked, they still want to overseed, but should they wait until the heat kind of slows down a little?
No, get it in now. It'll germinate. It'll cool off.
All right. A Grand Island viewer wants to know whether vinegar can be used effectively to kill weeds under a tree without harming the tree.
It can at a high enough rate.
All right. Nice job. There we go. All right, Kate.
I know.
Somebody's got to win,
Pressure.
right?
Okay. First up, we have an Alliance viewer who is asking, is there anything to do in the fall or the winter to combat scale on mature pines?
You can do dormant oils to combat scale. That would be my best educated guess.
Okay, the same viewer is wondering, would you do the same thing for scales on spruce, or are scales on spruce not the same issue?
It'll be the same issue, yeah.
All right. We don't know where this one came from, but she is saying, when will the chiggers disappear, and what insect repellent can you use on them?
So the chiggers like the hot weather, so as we wind down from summer, they're gonna start disappearing. DEET doesn't work really well because DEET is used for insects that look for carbon dioxide. So nothing. Sorry.
We have a Pleasantdale viewer who is saying they're seeing soldier beetles everywhere. Are they harmful?
No, they're actually beneficial pollinators.
All right. This viewer says they haven't seen any walking sticks. Do they overwinter, or there just aren't very many this year?
I don't think they're actually very common to begin with, but they're probably gonna overwinter as eggs.
All right, nice job. All right, Sarah and Dennis, you can arm wrestle.
You can take it, Sarah. I got it last time.
How polite. There we go. Well, you know, we have had another great season out in our garden. Our ornamentals have put on a very colorful show. We've had a bumper crop with our vegetables. Let's hear from Terry for our final update of the season from the Backyard Farmer Garden.
This year in the Backyard Farmer Garden, we are really happy about how everything turned out. We struggled this spring when we were getting our plants in the greenhouse up and going because January, February, March were so warm. A lot of our cool season seeds just really didn't germinate. Actually had to replant pansies like 3 times and still really didn't get much of a crop. So we were kind of worried about what we were gonna get. But as you can see all season long, we have had a gorgeous garden. Our garden will last well until fall, and we are still picking all of our produce In the past few weeks, we've averaged about 100 pounds of produce so far, and we are still getting all of those donations from you home growers on Tuesday nights, and that will go through the first week of October. So come enjoy the rest of the 2024 season in the Backyard Farmer Garden. Even though we're not on TV, we are still out here in the garden weekly, tending to the garden and making sure that it looks beautiful. So stop by the Backyard Farmer Garden and check it out.
Sarah, plants of the week.
Yeah,
What do
you
we
bet.
have this time?
So the tall yellow flowers, this is absolutely my favorite goldenrod. This one is called Wichita Mountain Goldenrod. And if you look at the shape of the stalks here, this plant grows much more like a liatris in a garden than it does like what we would think of as a traditional goldenrod with those great big wide heads. It's very upright and vertical in a garden, and it's just brings a really bright pop of color when it's blooming in the fall. Pollinators love it, of course, they like all the goldenrods. This one will get to be, maybe three or 3.5, somewhere in that height range. So a really excellent goldenrod to add to the garden. Then here in the front, we have another plant with some really great foliage coloration. This is chocolate satin ninebark. Ninebark is a very nice shrub to add to a landscape. It's pretty tough. One problem we run into with the ninebark sometimes is they tend to be susceptible to powdery mildew, but this one is very resistant. And as you can see, this, the sample that we have here, there's not any little bit of powdery mildew on this one. So a great selection of ninebark to choose from. They bloom in the early part of the summer, have white with a little bit of a shading of pink flowers, and just a very nice shrub, especially if you want something that has a little bit of a different foliage color to it.
Excellent. Thanks, Sarah. That's kind of a fun combination, too.
Definitely. Mm-hmm.
All right, excellent. Well, we always have announcements of really fun things to go on in the gardening world. And I think our first one is our BYF Garden Grow a Row, the produce donations, August 6th, October 8th. So we're still doing that. 4:30 to 7 in the Backyard Farmer Garden on Tuesdays, and then a free compost demonstration, Extension Master Gardeners, Saturday the 28th, 10 to 11 at Pioneers Park. So that's a good way to learn how to do things. All right, Kate, you have one picture on the first one. This comes to us from Mondayman, Iowa. She's in the middle of a corn and soybean field. Swarms of these. What are they and how can they be controlled?
So these are northern corn rootworm beetles, which makes sense because you're right next to a cornfield. Sometimes they'll cause damage to flowers, but if they're not really harming anything, it's just going to be temporary, let it pass. Otherwise, a bucket of soapy water works wonderful with beetles.
All right, 2 picks on the next one. What are these big bugs? And this is Arthur. Big bugs eating tomatoes. They were also in the corn.
So these are bumble flower beetles. So they're a type of scarab beetle, but they're also called fruit chafers, which as you can see, they're eating the fruit, but they tend to go for damaged or overripe fruits. So make sure that you're picking those fruits before they get too juicy for them. Otherwise, they usually don't cause any issues, but if it does become kind of a big thing, a lot of the tomatoes are being affected, then you can do that soapy water method.
All right, one pick on this one. This is Neola, Iowa. He says he thinks these are Japanese beetles. They return. Is there any best solution now or whenever?
Yeah, so it's hard to tell from the picture, but if they are Japanese beetles, it's a little tricky because right now they're in the flowers. So using an insecticide is not going to be recommended because we want to conserve pollinators and don't want to affect them. So once again, go to that hand picking or batting them into the soapy water. That's going to be your best option here.
All right, and one more picture. This comes to us from Norfolk. She was in the backyard when this bug bit her on the wrist. What is it?
So this is the larva of a green lacewing. They're also commonly called aphid lions because they're predatory on aphids and other small insects. And every so often they will bite people. They don't mean any harm. They just might think you're a giant aphid. I don't know, but they do have kind of a nasty little bite to them.
All right. Matt, one picture for you on the first one. This comes to us from West Point. She had underground sprinklers installed a year ago. She runs her irrigation well, it sounds like, seems sufficient, but now she's got this parched turf. Should she increase the watering time, and when should she stop watering?
Okay, so this is pretty common right now this time of year when we're having this dry weather with very low humidity. I think it's more or less just drought. And if you're watering the same amount of time as you were earlier in the year, now the turf is probably using more water, and the ET is probably in the 30s every day. So depending on what you're watering, maybe just up it a little bit and keep that well watered going into the fall until it goes dormant. You don't want it to go dry into the fall or into the winter. You want to have some moisture in there. So I would keep irrigating as long as it's growing, and then usually the system's shut off so you don't have an option to water at that point.
All right, 2 pictures on the next one from Lincoln. So this strip between sidewalk and curb has never been irrigated or watered this year. Now it looks like this. Is there any recovery possible?
There is some recovery possible if we were to put water to it now to try and help it through the winter. If you could soak that area and see what comes back. If it is a lot of bluegrass in there, it should just be dormant and probably come right back. Tall fescue, if it's been dormant for a long time, it might be dead and you might have to do some overseeding.
All right, 1 picture on this one. It's a striped lawn and got stripes and clumps there. So any suggestions here?
What this looks like is a well-watered lawn, so maybe cut back on that a little bit, and that would reduce the clumps, but it does look healthy. More or less, the dark spots are just wheel tracks from the same pattern used over and over. So try and alternate that or stagger over when you're mowing every other time, or whoever's doing it.
All right, 2 pics on the next one. It comes to us from southeast Nebraska. They want to thicken up their buffalo grass, which has all these weeds in it now. When do they kill the weeds and with what?
So right now is probably not the best time to treat when buffalo grass is going dormant, looks like there's a lot of foxtail in there, so you really can't treat that when it's mature like that. You can spray it, but it's already, to the point of already through seed. You're better off mowing it off. If there is broadleaves in there, you could do a broadleaf treatment now, which is the best time. Or you can wait till it goes dormant, and then you could use glyphosate for some of those cool season grasses in there. Just make sure that there's no green left in the plant.
All right, Dennis, 2 pics on the first one. This is an Arthur viewer. Been fighting these critters all summer. They're usually 2 or 3 in a group. Mounds, hole in the middle, 45-degree angle with a plug. What would kill them? He says 2% zinc phosphide. And what are they?
Well, if it's on an angle with a plug, it would be a pocket gopher. But those first 2 mounds were chunky in rounds. That's a mole, which doesn't take any type of bait. It takes earthworms. So those look more like moles, but they could be pop holes from, if they're associated with a 45-degree angle plugged hole, which is a pocket gopher. Pocket gophers usually succumb from a bait, but the bait has to be put down in the hole, and then no light can get down on the bait. So you have to find the main run, and the main run is not under the holes. It's off to the side, and that's where the bait has to be put in.
All right.
Otherwise, they just push the bait out.
Okay, we have a Lincoln viewer who had a woodchuck/groundhog, there's his little face, burrow under the sidewalk, and they tried to get rid of him, tried to do all sorts of things. They finally ended up putting a rock over it, and he hasn't come back, but they're wondering, will he come back next year to the same spot?
Probably not if you leave that rock there. As long as it's all plugged up and packed good, use some road or pea gravel, make it difficult. It has to find a new place to hibernate. So it's going to go someplace different.
All right, 1 pick on the next one. This is the 2nd year her garden's been fenced and critter involvement has gone away, but what caused this?
It looks like bites. That'd be a 13-line ground squirrel or a squirrel, depending on how low it's hanging.
All right, same thing
looks
here.
Like a squirrel bite.
Squirrel bites, same squirrels. All right, same thing. That one's Firth. Okay, and one more, Dennis. This is Lincoln. This hole appeared in the big retaining wall. What would have made that?
That's like a cicada killer. The way it's funneled out and the way it has a groove in it, that's an insect. It's a cicada killer.
Okay, excellent. All right, Sarah, 2 picks on this first one for you. They're wondering, are they losing this big honey locust? Browning all the way around. It's hard to tell, I know.
I don't think so. This looks more to me like maybe the beginnings of fall webworm webbing in the tree or something like that. And if that's the case, those caterpillars would just feed on the foliage. They won't feed on the underlying branches. So those branches should leaf out just fine next year. So I don't really think there's anything you need to do at this point.
Excellent. This is a Lincoln viewer wondering about this 9-bark. Does it look like a goner?
Well, it's certainly having a hard time. You know, rock mulches like that, like the lava rock in that picture, are not great for plants. And usually there's landscape fabric underneath that as well. And so that even more limits oxygen penetration into the soil. We can have all sorts of problems with root issues. Either the soil stays too wet or it stays way too dry. I would suggest removing the rock from around the plant, taking up the landscape fabric, putting in a wood chip mulch around the base of this plant, cut out the dead branches, make sure it stays watered through the fall, and let's see how it does in the spring.
All right, 2 picks on the next one. This is an azalea. She's wondering, is this disease or is this chlorosis and bad plant?
It looks like this plant is just very unhappy with where it's growing. I mean, azaleas prefer very highly organic soil with a lot of organic matter and with a acidic type of a pH level. So work some organic matter, some compost, some peat moss, something organic into the soil. Apply some mulch. That plant's not mulched either. Make sure it stays well watered, good, deep, infrequent waterings. But overall, that plant's just not very happy with the site.
All right, and one more. She's a novice planter. She kept these tomatoes in the house, and she's wondering, they never did anything. Should she not do that next year?
So tomatoes don't grow well in a in a house environment. It's not bright enough light. It's just not where they want to grow. If you don't have a space in the garden to grow them, then I would suggest getting some large containers and putting them out in the containers outside. I think the plants will do much better for you if you actually put them outside in the sun and the heat.
All right, thanks, Sarah. We know a lot of gardeners want to know what they can spray on their plants to keep those insects from devouring their produce. Sometimes that's the only solution, but Kate does say a little cleanup this fall will go a long ways to keeping that insect population down for next season.
As fall arrives, it's time to consider cleaning up your garden. Proper garden sanitation plays a key role in controlling pests and protecting your plants for the next growing season. Fallen leaves and old plant debris are perfect hiding spots for pests. If left untouched, problem insects and even diseases can overwinter and reemerge the following year. This can require what we consider a fall cleanup, or clearing away and discarding dead leaves, plant material, and other debris. Some of the most common pests that require a fall cleanup include those found in the vegetable garden, such as cucumber beetles, squash bugs, and asparagus beetles. However, not all debris is harmful. It also provides valuable winter shelter for beneficial insects such as pollinators and natural predators. So, if your garden hasn't had any pest issues, consider leaving behind some leaves and dead plant stems to help these insects survive. Keeping the garden and the landscapes clean is a balancing game. Remember, gardens that have had a history of pest issues should be tidied up to prevent the same issue from happening next year. However, healthy and thriving landscapes can be left a little bit messier to keep the good bugs around.
So do not forget that fall cleanup. That is absolutely critical to take care of all those pests for next year. All right, Kate, we have 2 pictures on the first one. This comes to us from Fillmore County. What's this?
These are really cool. These are commonly called water scorpions. So they're aquatic predatory insects, and even though they're called water scorpions, they actually don't have a stinger. That tube at the end of their abdomen is to help them breathe.
Perfect. All right, 1 pick on the next one. Found this beauty in the house a few nights ago. What was he doing? What kind, and why would he fly at night?
Yeah, so this is a dragonfly, and they can be attracted to lights. So there was probably a porch light on, or maybe just the window was, the shades were open and the lights were on inside.
All right, and no idea what kind of dragonfly?
It's probably one of the darner dragonflies, which are kind of the big species that we see.
All right, and 1 picture on the next one. This is a Beatrice viewer. She's wondering if this beautiful insect will hurt those beautiful flowers on her barrel cactus.
I have cactus envy right now. That's gorgeous. This is a katydid, so they're closely related to crickets and grasshoppers, but chances are it's not going to cause any issues here.
All right, excellent. Matt, you have 2 pictures on the first one. This is a Lincoln viewer. It's a 1-to-1 slope, had ferns and other plants that were volunteers. It was driven over, compacted, seeded into a mulch blanket. Grass came in, but then this stuff has started to deteriorate. Should they rip that out, or will it disintegrate, or should they just leave it be?
I would say if it's on the edges and it's coming up and you're mowing over it, you could make a slit with a sharp knife and then just take those out. You don't have to rip it all out because the grass will eventually just grow up and you won't ever see it again. But where it's coming up, it'll probably continue to come up and you'll be mowing over it, and it's kind of unsightly. But
All right. They had a huge pin oak removed on this next one, ground the stump. Now they've got this going on. So should they peel this up and start over and try to seed into it?
I think this will probably be an issue for years to come, because if that stump was ground down, let's say it was ground down a foot or 2 feet, there's probably still a little bit of stump underneath. So in dry times, it's going to dry out no matter what. In the spring, it probably looks great. You can get grass to grow over it, but just make sure that you add a little bit of water throughout the season when it is dry. Otherwise, it might end up looking like this again.
All right, excellent. Dennis, 1 picture for you on the first one, 2 pictures, sorry. This is one of your favorite beasties. Which one is this?
This is a juvenile black rat snake, very common, the eastern edge of this. Harmless, eats rodents, and when it gets older, eats baby bird and bird eggs.
All right, and then you have another one coming up, which is what kind of
bull
snake is this one?
Just a nice bull snake, eats rodents. Remember, all snakes shake their tails and make noise when they're frightened or scared. Doesn't mean it's a rattlesnake.
All right.
Rattle occurred millions of years later to enhance the original.
All right, and one more on the next one. This is a Lincoln viewer who says this animal scat keeps getting left everywhere.
Yeah, the way it's almost opossum. There wasn't a good scale there, but it's black and long and thin, so I would, off the top of my head, say opossum.
All right. Sarah, you have 1 picture on the first one. It comes to us from Stromsburg. He said this double cuke grew in his garden. It weighed 3.6 pounds. What made it do this?
So it's just a fluke of pollination. Sometimes things go wrong when flowers are pollinating and weird things happen. And this is, apparently you've gotten 2 ovaries that have fused together and ended up with this double cucumber.
Still edible.
Yeah, definitely still edible.
All right. 1 picture on the next one. She says this came up in her potted cactus. What is it?
It looks like a baptisia to me. So, you could try planting it outside and see if it comes up next year. Baptisia is a nice perennial, very, very tough, does very well under our climate, and blooms in the early summer with spikes of bluish flowers.
All right, and I kind of thought pea vine, so
okay.
Fabaceae, one way or the other.
It's a little hard to see the stem structure there to know if this is going to be an upright or a vine. But
exactly, little bitty guy. And then we have a viewer who said he planted this canna. This is out North Platte Way. Will it be okay to leave them in the ground, or does he need to dig them up, and does he deadhead the flowers?
So occasionally in very protected locations, canna rhizomes will overwinter, but you never really know until you do it to see if they're going to be able to survive. The more reliable technique is to dig them up and to overwinter them in a cool, protected location. You could cut those fading flowers off, and there's a chance. Well, I know some cannas did rebloom this summer, not all. But if you do it earlier in the summer, you might actually get a second flush of flowers and more color for the rest of the season.
Excellent. And I know we had some of the big red ones on campus that came back for years and years and years. So
if it's in just the right location, sometimes they'll
do that sometimes. Yeah, cannas are kind of a pretty cool plant. All righty.